So, why is this like this? Ugh, everything. There we go. So, apparently, the internet still can't decide if baristas are proletarians or not. Who could have seen that one coming, right? Honestly, part of it, though, is that liberals seem to have a problem with listening and learning anything that doesn't verify their preconceptions. But the whole subject brings up something that grinds my gears anyway. So let's talk about this. Because I have some bad news for people. Whether baristas are part of the proletariat or not doesn't really matter. Productive labor, unproductive labor, back and forth, blah, 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 blah. Straight up, seriously, doesn't matter very much. What, you don't believe me, right? Okay, let's look at it then, right? Let's look at it. When Marx was writing Capital, he was explaining the historical development of bourgeois society, right? He was showing us how social reproduction happens. He whittles it down to its smallest unit of reproduction based around the commodity. And then he abstracts from that concrete thing called the commodity in order to give us the entire first section of the book on the commodity. He develops the theoretical commodity relations and builds back up into a concrete reflection of that real thing in society. Why? Because it was the primary basis of social reproduction. How human society reproduced itself every single day, every single hour, every single minute. But it's been almost 200 years since then, guys. Things change. That's literally all they do, right? They change. That's what Marxism itself exists to understand, how things change. And this is why all the bozos of the last periods left get so obsessed with calling themselves proletarian and running around acting like bozos and misinforming each other about what all this stuff is about, because they ain't Marxists, not by a long shot. Look, the proletariat develops as the special product of bourgeois society, right? As capital necessarily expands during the industrial era, it is necessary to socialize production. And this creates technological advances and class struggle and all the other contradictions of the era, right? But something happens during the 20th century, right? As financialization begins. We develop something different in order for accumulation to continue with a rate of profit that can't help but fall. Marx goes to great lengths in Capital to explain how the proletariat is forced into a situation where it can do nothing but reproduce its social conditions. It has nothing but its labor to sell, which is then alienated from it and becomes, general human labor as such, transformed into the value that's embedded within commodities and capital, right? And it's then realized in the value form during exchange, or its ultimate form, money. That begins the process anew, right? But this change that financialization brings about, it makes something else happen. Because according to Marx, proletarians rising up and buying houses shouldn't be possible. That's owning far, far more than one's capacity to perform labor, isn't it? Yet these bozos don't think about that. Because again, they ain't Marxists, they're bozos. So how do we reconcile this fact that these people who sell their labor have been able to purchase houses, to own property, to own more than their capacity to sell labor? Well, for starters, we don't just arbitrarily take a section of what Marx says in describing the proletariat and use it as a universal definition. Instead, we look for what changed and we understand how it changed. If we're Marxists, that is. If we're just some bozos playing pretend, we run around calling ourselves proletarians from our gender studies classrooms because, we have that arbitrary definition, right? And who doesn't love a good gender studies classroom? I know I do. But that's beside the point. I don't actually love a gender studies classroom. That was a joke. As financialization as a process continues, though, even our money changes. It's no longer the money that Marx describes as a universal equivalent that originated in gold, right? A commodity. It becomes instead backed solely by politics, fiat currency. This gives our ruling class the ability to plan the economy on behalf of the accumulation for the monopoly conglomerates and financial institutions, right? The ones who basically kind of won the competitive era of capitalism. The anarchy of production is a thing of the past, my friends. We're going to have to deal with that fact. We are living in a planned economy, believe it or not. The ruling class literally holds down interest rates in order to push investment and to continue this accumulation as debts pile up. In 2008, which I'm sure you've heard me say this before, speculation, rents, and what really amounts to Ponzi schemes become the primary mode of accumulation. We're in a whole new era now. But what sticks around as our economy becomes more and more planned? The need to accumulate, right? This is where debts come in. Debts for houses, debts for cars, debts for education, debts for debts, everything. Everything becomes based in this debt. And these giant financial cartels run stock buyback scams and asset price inflation scams that drive up the asset price of the enterprise without actually creating a new capital, right? So the value is right here. The price goes further and further away, right? All of this is based on what Marx called fictitious capital, which is sort of like, to give an example, they'll buy a property and load it down with debt, right? To buy another property and load that down with debt. To buy another and another and another and another, right? This drives up the asset prices in question without actually creating anything. And that's just, two little examples. We haven't even gotten into derivatives, which is a whole nother messed up bag of bananas these bozos created. Regardless, though, what we've witnessed and must understand is the divorce of price from value. And if value is no longer the contradiction between use value and exchange value, and the exchange value is a planned phenomenon accomplished through the manipulation of interest rates, currency exchanges and devaluations, the inflation of price points and all this stuff, what does this say about class? It says that it's changed, right? This is how the middle classes became the special product of imperialism and financialization in the same way as the proletariat became the special product of industrial capitalism. Now, we're not going to get into a whole big thing here, right? But if we do not have an analysis of the rise and fall of the middle classes during the 20th century, then we have no idea whatsoever what we're talking about, and we're not Marxists at all. Meaning, the last periods left ain't Marxists, right? So what about all these working people who were able to own property, right? That ain't the proletariat no more, is it? We can see that in the basic outcomes they reach, that they reach being impossible for what Marx described arising as the proletariat. We are understanding social reproduction in its change and development. And whether their labor is productive or not doesn't even matter all that much, because the primary mode of accumulation for the ruling class has become something other than the alienated value of human labor embedded within the commodity. It has become a marker of value yet to be created. But at the same time, less and less actual value is created every year in the USA. Literally, less than 5% of returns on investment were actually turned into new capital for new ventures or reinvestment in actual productive sectors of the economy last year. At the same time, household debt hit all-time highs because that need to accumulate, it stuck around, right? For real, over $17 trillion. Wrap your head around that number if you can. That is an insane number. And all these leftists trying to talk about unproductive labor and how they're actually part of the proletariat when we're, so far past that era that there's over $17 trillion in household debt alone is just plain cuckoo bananas, peak bozo behavior. And we haven't even touched, by the way, the advance in technology and all of that sort of underlies all this. We're just extrapolating from the changing currency and financialization, right? These baristas, whether they're actually imbuing a commodity with value or not, frankly, it doesn't matter. And let's be clear, they're kind of not, you know. But either way, this is an obsolete industry that could be fully automated. We could easily just run into a coffee shop, push a button, and computers could sort out everything, right? We could even have advanced AI algorithms that simulate a service worker's job if we wanted to. I mean, I don't know why we'd, torture a robot like that, but we could. And that would be freeing these millions of people to contribute to society in some productive way and actually create new value and reinvigorate our economy. Maybe by getting jobs, rebuilding the infrastructure that's literally falling apart in our country. I mean, there's a million other things they could do, but they're all stuck in this obsolete industry, just trying to eke out enough to scrape by like everybody else doing this obsolete job because our mode of social reproduction, the boss worker relationship, guess what? It's still here. So what's that tell you? For anyone who's read Engels, it should tell you that it looks like the relations of production are being outmoded by the forces of production. That's reproletarianization, my friends. And that is what we must understand if we're to have any sort of clear picture of 21st century America. But what do I know? That's not even the hot topic today, really. The hot topic is kind of taking a victory lap because CNN, the lapdog media of the ruling elite, has completely failed in their attempt to smear us. You guys ready to get into that? Because I don't know. I feel like I am. What do you guys think? Oh no, where is Daniel? I don't see him. Daniel, where are you? Daniel. There he is. What's up, fellas? How you doing today? Oh, wait, hold on. We can't hear you yet. We got to unmute you. There you go. Unmute your mic, Carlos. On StreamYard, brother. There we go. What's up, fellas? How you doing? I'm joined today by special guest, one of my closest friends in the world, a man I'm proud to call my brother and my colleague, Carlos Garrido, and as always, the best producer in the business, Mr. Daniel Gutierrez. What's happening, guys?
Hey, what's up, brother? Happy to be here again. This call-in show is one of my favorites that we do here at the Institute. It's always great to hear people call in and ask questions and talk.
I'm hearing what's it called? An echo from Carlos, of course, because we, wouldn't be a Noah show if we didn't screw something up. But that's all right. Thanks for joining us today, Carlos. How are you doing, Daniel?
Doing really great. Just been busy here with ACP and some Midwestern Marx production stuff, and doing super well. Thanks.
Awesome. Carlos, do me a favor, just leave the Discord for a minute and then come back in when we get it going. That'll sort the problem out. So there's a lot going on right now. That hit piece was wild and kind of unimpressive, if you ask me. I watched the entire thing. I actually I was looking for a link to CNN's thing, but apparently they only did it live. So I got to listen to it while listening to Haas streaming about it and reacting live, which made it far better for me, by the way. Did you guys get a chance to listen to it or what?
I did. I saw it with, I had the same issue. I had it on with CNN and then they asked me to pay and I wasn't going to give them anything. So I just tuned into Haas's stream and it made the experience so much better. It was a hilarious reaction and I think everyone had the same sentiment, which it was a complete dud. I mean, all they had that made us look bad was this guy named Charmhole, who, frankly, is someone who is mentally unstable, to put it in kind terms, who had nothing to do with us and who visibly is the man that stands out from the event, who's someone that Haas, in the 2-hour interview that he did with anti-Irish Donnie, because the Irish spirit is gone if a man does a documentary like that.
Completely.
2 hours of an interview with Haas doesn't show it at all. But in that interview, one of the things that Haas tells him is like, if you follow this Charmhole guy, like, you're committing yourself to participating in one of the most journalistically dishonest practices out there, because this guy has nothing to do with us. He's not in our community. He, floats around all these different communities, and he's kind of crazy, but, just because we're nice, we let him in, and maybe we shouldn't have. I don't know. That might have been our mistake. Maybe we shouldn't have let him in, but so they, instead of listening to what Haas told him about this guy, he literally followed him, and the whole first third to half of the documentary was basically on fucking Charmhole. So it was such a ridiculous smear piece. The things they show of Jackson make him look very relatable. I mean, there's some jokes that he makes that are like locker room talk type stuff that are painted as if it's the worst thing in the world. And what's interesting is that even like the Hitler comment, like calling Hitler trans, which is a half joking thing, and you can say, that's not to my comedic taste, that's fine. But the reaction that Hassan gives, which is painted as the goody-goody leftist alongside, of course, Joshua Frank from Counterpunch and the PSL's leader, Brian Becker, very interesting delineation between the acceptable lefts and us. The reaction that Hassan gives is that Comrade Hinkle is to the right of Hitler for calling Hitler gay and transsexual. So what does that imply? It implies that it is somehow worse, more right-wing to call Hitler gay and trans than to be Hitler. I don't know if you guys caught that, but as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh my God, this is phenomenal for us, because it shows the superficiality of these people's identity politics. There's no substance. There's no actual commitment to anti-imperialism, to the class struggle. It's all the presentation of leftism from a very, virtue signaling Western standpoint. And that's something that the American people could not give less of a shit about. The vast majority of the American people are interested in bread and butter issues, and those are the ones that Jackson speaks to. He is very confident. He laughed off all of the attempts by Donnie to make him some crazy nut because he doesn't want a third nuclearized world war with Russia, or because he likes the dictatorship of the proletariat in China. So I think overall they tried to make us look bad, and they failed quite miserably. And in the process, we're able to draw the clear lines between the old left, the futile left, and the new left, which is actually communist, and it's actually here and means business and stands on business.
1000%, brother. I want to hear your thoughts on it too, Daniel. But I just want to say before that we do that, what Carlos just said, that this crazy spoiled rich kid Hassan Piker was literally trying to say that making a joke that some people would find offensive is worse and to the right of the leader that instigated the Nazi Holocaust, that tried to invade the Soviet Union, that got his entire country destroyed, murdered over 20 million Soviets alone, right? To say that that's worse can only come from someone that's so incredibly out of touch. It boggles my mind how ridiculous and absurd and self-important you have to be to say something like that. Also, I want to real quick, Sarah, it's a call-in show. If you have something to say, call in the show. We're happy to talk about it. Just stop whining in the chat, please. But I kind of got frustrated at Hassan because that's not even the worst thing he said. The worst thing he said was when this Donnie guy that was trying to paint him as he's the good leftist here to steer all the conspiracy theorists in the right direction. He said that something so incredibly insulting and out of touch to the entire working class of the U.S. that I lost it. And right now I have a post going like semi-viral about it. I'll pull it up in a second, but this guy was trying to say that the American people, who by the way, 78% of us, according to the most recent polling data I've seen, now struggle paycheck to paycheck, was saying that everything is built on us getting quote unquote treats. This spoiled rich kid who's never worked a single day in his life and lives in a $3 million mansion is talking like this. I wish I could swear without, Google shutting us down, because what an insane scumbag. But what do you think, Daniel? I want to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, no, I had the fine pleasure of watching the CNN program with some of the comrades from the ACP New York chapter last night, and yeah, it was just kind of ridiculous. I don't know really how else to put it. I think that some of us had been worried that they would have taken, perhaps some statements or certain things that members of the ACP or parts of the executive committee had said completely out of context. But it was actually, in many ways, it was just like a kind of like a smear job, a guilt by association, trying to associate this fellow Charmhole and somehow paint him as like as like the typical member of our community. And
he's not even part of it.
Yeah, I don't know this guy, but clearly this person is in some way he was exploited actually for this program, and that's actually, I find that very problematic, and I find that it's abusive on some level on the part of CNN to take somebody like that and to use them as a battering ram to try to smear our organization. But I think regardless, it was a massive failure on their part, because the American people aren't going to fall for it. It only actually probably makes us look better in most people's eyes, because if we're getting attacked by a media organization like CNN, most people are going to look at that and say, hey, these guys might actually be the good guys. So yeah.
All right, check this out. I'm gonna share my screen real quick before we get started with the calls. I don't want to take too much of your time. I'm sure there's people lining up, Daniel. I had to hear your thoughts on it. You know what I mean?
For sure.
And that's such a good point too, about the fact that, like, I mean, it's despicable. I mean, one has tended to interpret it from like our perspective and how messed up it is from our side but like, if you try to put yourself in the position of someone like Charmhole, like, he's kind of just getting exploited because he's mentally unstable and is, he's being instrumentalized by CNN to fit an agenda, and it's kind of sad.
It's really sad. What they were doing was trying to like use him to paint Jackson as if he's some like wacko nut and or possible foreign agent. Like every time he said something good about Russia or China, it was, isn't he a gift to Chinese propaganda? Like, nothing about whether it was correct or not, right? Nothing about whether he had his facts in a row, whether he could prove what he was saying. Nothing. Just that we think that this is good for these things, as if China being somehow the enemy of the American people is just what should be the conditions at all times, which is crazy. But I wanted to show you guys this. So this is my post for Hassan Piker. I'll try to read it without swearing. It says, F you on the hunt. You spoiled, out-of-touch rich kid, epping pathetic hipster, fake, pretend Marxist who wouldn't know a dialectic from a diuretic, trying to use the aesthetic of human liberation for your fashion statement and addiction to attention. 78% of Americans are struggling paycheck to paycheck. People are worried about their ability to buy groceries as the prices skyrocket, afford homes as the prices are inflated, and get forced to enslave themselves to the banks, accruing more and more debt with 2024 hitting a record all-time high of household debt at over 14 effing trillion dollars. And you sit here from your effing mansion looking down on us for losing, quote, treats, you effing scumbag. It's gotten a few hundred likes by now and quite a few shares, so I'm hoping he's seen it because that's beyond screwed up. It really is.
Hassan is the worst. I mean, somebody dug up some comment too that he made, which is basically that like, you know, in the battle for like global hegemony, like, I support the U.S. over China because I want to have access to like pornography or something like this. I mean, this guy is a degenerate. Let's be real. I mean, this guy has no respect for you know, for average everyday working people. He's an elitist. He's a total culture vulture. This guy.
100%. Like, it just shows me how out of touch he is with the actual real world, right? But China literally has eradicated more poverty than any other force in all of human history. That is hundreds and hundreds of millions. Literally, their lives changed for the better. Literal freedom from abject poverty. Freedom to better find their own fulfillment. And he is more concerned with being able to watch pornography, which, by the way, has its own sexual exploitation attached to it because, again, he's a spoiled rich scumbag. He's more concerned with that than actual human freedom. Yet he tries to call himself a Marxist. Seriously, I don't say shame on you often, but shame on him. That is disgusting.
And you know what? What's crazy? It's like this isn't happening out of a void. This isn't happening out of nothing. There's history here. Hassan is the sort of person that has platformed people like AOC, who voted to give money to the Iron Dome, who has performed the sort of, you know, fake Palestinian solidarity that's in de facto a support for the Zionist entity, who supports a party and has been entrenched in being the funnel for young radicalizing leftist kids to support the establishment Democratic Party. He's platformed her. Someone who supports a party that is currently responsible for around 200,000 deaths in Palestine in this ongoing genocide, more than 500,000 deaths in Ukraine in the proxy war against Russia. So she's okay. But throughout the years that we've told Hassan, because we've had a very non-sectarian attitude, hey, let's have a conversation. Eddie at least is big enough on social media to have it. Eddie has had upwards to around 400,000 followers on TikTok, videos that have been seen by millions, I think, for a period of time. Eddie's TikTok was even larger than Hassan's. Let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation. Years of let's have a conversation. I'm sure it's probably something similar with people like Haas and Hinkle. They're very open to speaking with everyone and anyone. That's why they speak to the people that they speak, because they're open to speaking with everyone. And if they haven't spoken with leftists, it's because the leftists have said no. They always find it somehow better to speak to the liberals in power who agree on the identity politics but who carry forth genocide than to speak to people who have the correct politics on imperialism but who perhaps have some socially conservative views. And then they have the audacity, some of them, to say that their red line is imperialism. Some of the more so-called enlightened ones. So, you know, the context is one where we have asked these people. We're not just shitting on them out of nowhere. We've asked them, let's have conversations. Let's talk. If you think we're disingenuous, let's talk. If you want to slander us and be libelous and say that our party is reduced to a crypto scam that's just trying to sell this crypto coin, let's talk, you know? And nothing has been reciprocated. But he'll talk to CNN. He'll talk to the media platforms that fucking sold us into war. The same platforms that played the drums that led to hundreds of thousands of Americans getting killed overseas, tens of millions of people dying in the Middle East, hundreds of millions being displaced. He'll talk to them. He won't talk to us, though. Fuck you. Fuck you. You're a pussy.
Of course not. Yeah, and you know, I don't want to get too deep into this because I actually have kind of a surprise for you guys. Right after this stream, we're going to be doing a second stream. Danny's going to be joining us, and we're going to talk all about the CNN hit piece. So stay tuned right after this for that stream. It's going to be awesome. I want to talk about one more thing before we get into the calls today, though. DD Geopolitics, whom we're very close with. John, right? John Jackman, who works for the Institute as well. Party member, party leader. And Sarah is awesome. She's never been anything but nice and polite every time I've spoken with her. They recently got banned from YouTube for no reason. They had a record-breaking stream on YouTube. Next day, they get banned. I don't think that's a coincidence. I just don't. What do you guys say? Have you guys heard of that?
Yeah, no, I did hear about it. I was shocked. I caught part of that stream. It was pretty incredible guests that they had. So I was actually thrilled. I thought like this is quite an amazing collaboration, groundbreaking, really, in the West, but maybe too groundbreaking for some. Yeah, I don't know, Carlos. Did you have thoughts on the guest and kind of the actions of YouTube?
I haven't seen the stream, but unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me that they're coming after them. They're stepping up the repression, and it's of voices that are like ours. And I mean, it scares me for as a general phenomenon, but it also personally scares me for us. I know we've invested thousands and thousands of hours in growing this channel. So much work has been put into it. And to know that these bozos can just pull the rug under us out of nowhere with no reason, just because we decide to share what we're holding up as truth, but we're supposed to be endowed to have the right to share as Americans. It's quite scary. So, I mean, today might be the last day that we live stream on YouTube. From now on, we're going to be seeing if we can migrate the live streams to Rumble, which is an app that seems to be more respectful of free speech. Mm-hmm. So all of those watching either now or later on, make sure to find us on Rumble and follow us there. We're still trying to figure out the transition, but it's going to be made literally as soon as possible. Our YouTube is still going to be active. We're going to be posting here highlights from those streams, and perhaps we'll post some original video essays, which I've been interested in doing. But YouTube is becoming a place that censors very, very easily. I think George Galloway had all of his interviews with Scott Ritter, which are like dozens over the years, wiped out. And people like Richard Medhurst have been censored. So many people have been censored that it's honestly kind of surprising that, I mean, they came after us with demonetization for like 4 months. But before anything substantial happens, I think we should be migrating the live streams to another platform. So if you're a loyal supporter of our institute, if you like our work, make sure to look out on social media for all of our announcements for Rumble streams upcoming.
Yeah, we already have an account over there. We haven't used it in maybe almost a year, like 8-9 months. But we're like Carlos said, we're going to be moving over there because Google is after us. We can't pretend otherwise. And people like us. I want to say thank you to Popers for the gifted membership and Justin Watson for becoming a member. Thanks, guys. We're a completely people-funded institute, as all of you guys know. So we're going to start getting into the show. I mean, let's do it now. Let's get this going, huh?
High Sheriff Hazard is a hard man to be. High Sheriff is his only plan. He digs through pockets, takes what he can, for he's High Sheriff Hazard. He caught me one evening, and here's what he said: "You look like a Russian has heard. The answer is simple, the answer is clear. We all get together, ain't got nothing to fear. We throw the old bastard right out on his ear. Farewell to High Sheriff Hazard.
Man, that song is so good. I love it. Welcome back, everybody. We're in for a good show tonight, I think. It's awesome having you here with me, Carlos. Let's just get right into it, though. Screw it. Who do we have up first, Daniel? Yeah, we just call him Dad Joke around here. That's fine. What's up, Dad Joke? How you doing, brother? Let me a second. I gotta share my screen. Give me a second, everybody. I'm not gonna screw up like I usually do. Here we go. All right. Now everybody will be able to hear you. See it? I don't screw everything up. I promise. What's up, brother? How you doing tonight?
Well, I have some very important questions for you.
I'm sure you do.
So, why did the grape jelly go to the rock concert?
I don't know.
For a jam session.
All right.
So, what kind of flowers are great friends?
I don't are what? Great threats?
Great friends.
Friends. I don't know.
Rosebuds.
All right.
Well,
what's no more. You're killing me, brother. You're killing me. What's the actual question you got? You always have really good questions. Besides the dad jokes.
Sure. Mao is one of the heads of Marxism-Leninism, of course, but we also have a movement that calls themselves the Maoists. I know others have gone into this in much more detail, but in summary, what is the difference between Mao as the fifth head of Marxism-Leninism versus the Maoists as kind of their own separate thing?
Ooh, that's a great question. You want to take that one, Carlos?
Yeah, that's a great question. The Maoist is a classification that arises out of the cultural revolutions. The Cultural Revolution, the people that identified and wanted to continue that process, that were loyal to the Gang of Fours and to the people within the Cultural Revolution that had a more book worshipy attitude towards Mao, that endorsed the two whatevers, which was like whatever Mao said and whatever Mao wrote, some dumb dogmatist slogan. Those people are the ones that considered the reform and revolution not as a necessary turn, but a continuous process of the Chinese revolution, but as a complete break with it. And they considered Deng and everyone that has came after as capitalist roaders, and a lot of them consider modern China as like capitalist country that has nothing to do with socialism, that has betrayed communism and all these other different things. So the Maoists are those people that were kind of unable to accept that the Cultural Revolution had to be sublated. And the people that adapt Mao Zedong thought as one of the important essential canonical moments in Marxist-Leninist theory, those are the people that accepted both the Cultural Revolution while critiquing parts of it, but also the reform and opening it up as its appropriate successor, as its sublation, as something that's part of the same process but represents a higher stage within it. So Maoists are kind of those people that weren't able to cope with the fact that the Cultural Revolution kind of did what it had to at a new moment of reform and opening up was necessary to continue the whole purpose for why the Cultural Revolution was necessary in the first place.
Yeah, I'm going to add a little bit on there. And a lot of this, and you're going to hear me repeat this over and over again. I'm sure you've heard me say it in the past. A lot of it is because education in Marxism just wasn't there. For them to believe this was a complete break and turnaround indicates an improper dialectical analysis of the situation, right? They can't say the ongoing changes in the particular situation of China. What they saw instead was that communism or socialism must be X, Y, and Z. And if it is not X, Y, and Z, then the real world and socialism in the real world no longer matters, reducing them to basically utopianism, right? A utopianism of the past, which I mean is kind of reactionary at this point, right? But that's a great question, brother. What else you got for us?
Well, I heard that there's a great exercise to do after feeling gaseous, burpees. Other than that, though, this one might be more. Speaking of book worship, I hear you're a bit of an author, Noah.
I try to be.
Well,
Carlos,
what are some of your
you that I'm more of an author that writes and writes and writes.
Oh, it's a joke.
Oh,
that'll make the joke.
Go ahead, it's not a joke. I'm just asking, what are Noah's novels and any that he recommends?
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, I actually got my start writing fiction. And I sold a novel to Random House that never ended up getting published. There was an issue with the editor there. She left while working on my book, and they tanked it. But it's kind of a funny story. So I got this idea. I was in a bar one night with my buddies, right? And this was when Twilight, remember Twilight, was really big. And I was complaining about it. I'm like, dude, I am so sick of teenage vampires in love. I want to see something about teenage zombies in love. That would be hilarious to me. You know, like running around like brains, like on a date or whatever. But my buddy's like, well, you should write it. So I did. And when you're an unknown author, what you do is you write cold query letters to potential agents. And I lied my ass off in my letters. I told all of them that there were already other agents reading it and interested, which was not the case. But one of them picked it up. And it just so happened to be at a time when zombie novels were a huge fad in fiction publishing. So they bought my book. I wrote one other one that was kind of a weird, like sort of, I themed it on 80s rock transitioning into 90s rock, and it just flopped. It was very bad. But my recommendations for fiction are John Swartzwelder, who used to be one of the writers for The Simpsons. He has, dude, okay. So here's the thing, and I've told Eddie about this. When I sold them my book, they were like, this can, because we were asking about movie options, right? That's always a question you ask. I'm like, I know this can be a movie. I promise it can be a movie. And my agent's like, no way. I would feel stupid asking. There is no way they will ever make that movie. And years later, they made that movie. And I'm like, that's my story. But yeah, here we are. Anyway, so John Swartzwelder wrote a really hilarious series that like makes fun of hard-boiled detective novels. Another favorite fiction author of mine is Christopher Moore. He wrote a really, really good one called Lamb, The Gospel According to Biff, Christ's Childhood Friend, which covers the missing years of Jesus's life in a really like sweet and tongue-in-cheek way, which I liked. He wrote a comic retelling of King Lear, Shakespeare's King Lear, from the point of view of the fool, called Fool, which is really good. But yeah, those would be my recommendations for you.
Well, interesting you mentioned a bit about the detective stuff because you know Dashiell Hammett,
Mhm.
the guy who created Sam Spade, one of the founders of noir.
Of
He was
course.
very big into communist politics.
Really? I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm guessing his competition was seeing red.
Get him out of here, Daniel. You're killing me, John. Thank you for the call, brother. That was awesome.
Thank you,
It's
comrade.
funny. I don't read fiction anymore, man. Do you ever read fiction, Carlos?
My brain feels like I'm taking time away from Hegel, and then I feel bad when I start reading fiction. So I go read
I
some
feel like I'm
philosophers.
abandoning my duty. Like I should be
Yeah.
reading something to educate myself, and I'm not. Like, how dare I read for fun? You know?
If anyone's seen that movie, it's a old school baseball movie, and it was one of my favorites because I was a baseball player. But it's called Major Big League or something, where
Major
it's like
League.
the kid.
Dude, I'm
It
from
no,
Cleveland. Of course, I'm.
not the Cleveland one.
Oh,
Calm your horses. Not the Cleveland one. The one where it's a little kid, like a 13-year-old kid, who inherits the Minnesota. Is it the Twins? I
Little
think he
Big League.
inherits the Twins.
Little Big League.
Little Big League. Yeah. That's that Major Big League. Little Big League.
Mhm.
But in that movie, there's a scene where I think one of the relievers, this like very scruffled, hairy guy, they point at him and he's like chewing 3 pounds of gum and he's like, fun? I hate fun. And that's kind of what I've devolved into. Anything that's like watching TV or a show or some leisurely reading, it's like, no, I want to break my head over some Hegel or secondary readings from Hegel or something like that. And I figured out how to use LibGen, so I'm just reading like a maniac a bunch of shit that just came out.
Awesome. Who we got next, Daniel?
We got Mac Williams, first time caller actually. Mac, you'll want to unmute yourself if you're muted. But Mac has a great question about parenting, Marxist-Leninist parenting.
Excellent.
yeah.
What's up, Mac? How you doing tonight?
Hey there, I'm doing great.
Awesome. What do you got for us?
So yeah, I'm a dad. Coming off the dad joke guy, the weekly dad joke contributor.
You're among
so-
co-dads, I guess.
Yeah, both of y'all. So I have 2 little kids, but I have family that we got nephews and nieces, and I have one nephew and his mother and my sister-in-law. They're kind of interested in learning more about communism. I kind of have pretty firm grasp on all the the actually existing socialisms and some of the history and how to debunk a lot of propaganda and stuff. But just starting down at bare bones, like the basic question for you guys is like, how would you in like the bullet point kind of format, elevator pitch, however you want to think about it, how would you introduce the huge concept of communism? Like where would you start?
Well, I can go first because I've been through this. My son's 14 at this point. And it was sort of always there in the background. When he was little, he got very into learning about history. I still have one of his papers when he was 9 years old. They were writing on their hero, and he wrote about Lenin. So he would ask me, he really liked the stories of revolution, of, the downtrodden workers rising up against the rich tyrants. He really liked that. Stories of the October Revolution for him were the exact same as stories of the American Revolution, the French Revolution. All that, he really liked that type of story. But when he first began like really understanding how the world works and what politics is, these days kids are perceptive and they see how the entire world has been politicized. They see stuff like, adults complain about the government and the elites and things like that. So I begin with like a very simple, communism is just us. It's regular people like us in power. rather than, you know, the government who doesn't work for us. They it's true. Eddie is my son. Who knew, right? I had a wild 20s, I guess. But no, it's sort of like I break it down just very simply. Like, you know, it's the giant global financial elites that, you know, they've never worked in their lives. They're sort of like an aristocracy almost. And that's who runs things in capitalism. And that's why, you know, the bridge that we used to take is falling apart and we can't take it now. That's why the city has no jobs anymore. That's why, you know, I work so much, that kind of stuff. And communism is just all of us getting together and overcoming that. And so for me, this is sort of, this makes them understand why I'm in the Communist Party, right? I don't, what do you think, Carlos?
This comment from Eddie got me. It's like kids are easy to teach, and all the kids I know are either communists or fascists. I'm about to get my son's like about to be 2, so I haven't gotten to the age where I can start talking to him about this yet. But I think that understanding, and this might be very simplistic, but I mean, understanding communism as a society being ruled by a logic that's somehow akin to the family is important. Family, the values that are raised to the level of supremacy are not the accumulation of capital. That's the bourgeois family. Working class families are not like that. In the family, what's elevated to a level of supremacy is like the flourishing of the family. In a basic sense, it's like what the Greeks considered social virtue. What Aristotle, the concept that existed for political economy was oikonomia, which meant like household management to ensure the flourishing of the household. And if you can already start on the basis of something they understand, like, hey, you know, this household that we have has a certain division of labor and it's aimed at producing the good of the household. Communism is a society that functions in that same way, where the purpose, the telos, the goal of the society is the flourishing of the society itself. And what we have right now is a society where, because it's controlled by people who own, the whole purpose and aim and telos of the society is to accumulate more and more capital in the hands of the small group of people. And it produces an ultimately detrimental social outcome. So that would be the sort of basic way that I would introduce a kid to it.
Only Carlos would introduce a child to communism through going to Greek philosophy. No, that did actually bring up something that, like Slava said here, that's funny you pulled it up, Carlos. I pulled it up a minute ago. It really is easier to teach children than adults. Children are sponges, they're learning already, right? Adults become sort of set in preconceptions, but more importantly, your children are already organically seeing what a communist is as you're parenting them. So he being a good father, you know, is just, it comes natural to most of us, yes, but it also shows them that anything they may hear in school or in media or whatever doesn't compute. You know, like, we're obviously not crazy liberals, right? We're obviously not trying to abolish the family if we literally had them and created them, right? And I think that's sort of a background thing they just pick up without us even having to try. What do you think? Did we do a good job with your question?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's great insight, because you know, where my mind starts, I always want to go into history too, kind of like your son. I've always had an interest in that. You know, I'm thinking like I got to explain like what feudalism is, because to explain what capitalism, you have to know that context, and you know, but obviously you just need to be relatable as the main theme, and then I would take any questions, you know, from whoever's asking, and just try to address those one by one. But I think you guys hit on many points that I could go back to, listen to, and
Awesome.
reteach. So,
Well, I'm glad we
yeah,
could help.
appreciate
I have a boy who's a very boy, so he really liked the adventure story kind of element of it.
Yeah.
He also, when he was young, got super interested in the process of change solely because I explained evolution and sort of the back and forth relationship between our environment and us affecting each other as our DNA mutating and us actually affecting that mutation in some way. So, he's like 5 years old talking about how he's a mutant and he thought that was really cool. But that got him thinking along the same lines of Marxism, really, just how change happens. Putting it in language that they like gets them interested and invested. And that's how it was for my son.
Totally. Yeah, and I love the putting Lenin in the same context as the American Revolution and other revolutions as well. That's a fantastic way to kind of intro an American, into that kind of thinking. So
awesome.
Again,
Well, I'm
appreciate the
glad we could
points.
help, brother. Thank you so much for the call. We
Thank you,
don't get
brother.
enough like wholesome calls like that, Carlos. You know what's funny? I spent all of last week trying to get trolls to call in. I noticed that so many people talk a big game on Twitter, and then when it comes time to put their money where their mouth is, they're nowhere to be found. So I spent all week just trying and trying and trying to get people to actually do that today. So fingers crossed we'll get at least one of them to actually, not be a complete bozo about it. Who do we have next, Daniel?
Hey guys, we've got Pavel Lanowski, actually one of our YouTube followers and fans who is calling us all the way from Austria. It's up past his bedtime. But,
awesome. Well, we appreciate that, Pavel. Thank you.
Hi, do you hear me?
We can hear you. What's up, brother? How you doing tonight?
Hey, comrade.
Oh, great! I have to stand up tomorrow to my corporate job again. I cannot bitch around too much, as let's say the situation from a social network is more stable in a social democracy than in America, but I consider it a slow poison, which makes people feel that everything is fine despite it not being fine whatsoever. So
sorry, I'm throwing
I
shit
have
around the room. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have a few questions. So basically, Midwestern Marx and RBN actually got me to start actually listening to Marxist theory. And also Eddie did quite a good job, let's say, getting myself over my hiccups with communism overall. So the interest got evoked there. And I started slowly to read. It's not an easy task, as Carlos described, to read Capital. But I actually appreciate how it's structured, as I am a natural scientist a chemist by my education. It's written very scientifically.
Yep.
Yes,
However,
Yep.
however, it is also very, very dense.
Yeah.
That's why I have to read a page sometimes 3 times. But overall, I wanted also to get active, actually to start organizing here in Austria and actually trying to help the communities here, or at least trying to get some social connections here with the local communist parties. And as part of, let's say, local Palestine organizing, I encountered a few so-called communist parties here.
Mm-hmm.
And what I immediately noticed is that every single one of them are criticizing China for not actually being communist. And or not even being socialists. So some go even as far as it is. And when I am countering by, well, they bridge the wealth gap, they extended the lifespan of their population, they actually, I think they even removed the, let's say, landlords, to the best of my knowledge, recently in China. They held billionaires accountable. So on all these arguments, they are still insisting that, China is not communist enough, and it frankly annoys me, because we are living here in Austria in a social democracy where you have obvious corruption also, where you have I'm sorry, I do not want to curse, but I'm a little bit annoyed.
Understandably.
Say all these NATO supporters playing nuclear roulette, or trying to supporting NATO actions, which is only a few hundred kilometers from Austria away.
No kidding.
I do not feel very comfortable with the morons I'm seeing around me. Just from a purely self-preservation perspective, it absolutely does not make sense. And then they are also criticizing everything, but not basically providing a way forward.
All they do is pretend they're better than everyone without doing anything themselves, right?
Yeah, and it annoys me, because I'm at the point that I actually want to do something. I'm a pragmatist. Let's put it like this. I do not want to invest my time in a party just for talking. I actually want to help. Even if I have a full-time job and it's not easy to find the time, I would be willing to cut it out. So
look, you're in good company. We're both Americans. Pragmatism's in our blood, right? But I think
that's actually what I really like about your attitude. It is to take what you have, and even the idea of taking American history and even, let's say, the Bill of Rights, which you have, to build up your own communist party, was frankly inspiring.
Well,
and actually you build upon and build upon it. For example, I don't think that any communist party in Austria will be successful as long as they, for example, do not take into account Austrian tradition and culture. So if they do not build up on this and be only, let's say, and reach out also maybe to more conservative parts, while focusing on the main contradictions, they will not get anywhere. I will probably try at least to be involved with the two local communist party to get to know the people there. Maybe I get someone else to know. But overall, I do not have much hope for them. I mean, frankly, one of these parties has actually a conference somewhere in October where they will train their members how China is not communist. Frankly, when I'm thinking about this, it's for me kind of like wasted time and resources.
100%.
Basically criticizing one of the biggest socialist countries, which has some material success.
Well, I want to. I really. Sorry to interrupt you. We're getting on in time. So, and we have a few more calls to get to. I don't mean to be
fine. Maybe I will call in next week, and maybe it's not so late the next time. I have quite a bit to talk about, because I have also anti-communist parents who grew up in communist Poland, which makes it even more funny to speak with.
I bet that's a whole other bag of bananas, brother. Look, I just want to say one thing, because I really want Carlos to answer this one. He's the perfect one to do it. Anytime they talk about China, just ask them where their revolution is to be in a position to criticize China. Go ahead, Carlos. Sorry.
Yeah, it's crazy how, I mean, we have to understand the particularities of each area, but it's getting very scary. I don't know if it's because of how globalized the world is, because of the development of technology. It's getting very scary to see how extremely similar the flaws that one thought was rooted in one's context are. Because we have comrades in the chat saying it's the same here in Holland. There was someone who recently did they did a review of my recently published book, Why We Need American Marxism, and the review was called Why We Need Icelandic Marxism, and they detailed that there was many similar flaws over there in Iceland. Um, so I think that the globalized character of the capitalist system, specifically those of us that exist within the sphere of influence of American imperialism, whether we're in the belly of the beast or just in a country like Austria or Iceland or Holland, we're going to have some of the same tendencies and errors arise in the left. And I think, I don't want to be reductive, but I think that a good chunk of them are rooted in these two factors. One, it's material, which is what's the class position of a lot of these people? Do they feel the necessity, or are they just comfortable? And I think it's going to be a mix between some of them are just comfortable, they're middle class, they have stable jobs, and others are perhaps not very comfortable, but they still have the consciousness of the middle classes. They might be reproletarianized, right? But they still have a middle class consciousness. And then the other central factor is ideological. Like the U.S. and Britain and the whole imperialist sphere has spent a whole lot of money to influence the what passes as Marxism in the whole world. It hasn't just been in the West. The Congress for Cultural Freedom was a worldwide program of distorting what Marxism is, of creating a compatible left that suits the purposes of imperialism, not just by being explicitly anti-communist, but by operating in a national context in a way that entrenches ideas within Marxists that and worldviews that make it fundamentally impossible for them to connect to their people. And I think that what you're saying about how these people relate to China is another very clear example of that. It's the purity fetish in action. China doesn't look like the pure idea that these people have in their head. And because they pass judgment on world affairs on the basis of whether something measures up to that pure idea or not, when it doesn't measure up to that pure idea, they reject it. And the reality is, as Lenin and Hegel and Marx and literally every important dialectical thinker in history teaches us, that there's nothing that's pure, not in nature, not in human thinking, and not in society. Socialism is never going to look like the abstract idea that was developed in 1875 in Marx's critique of the Gotha program. And to expect that it does is to commit oneself to being fundamentally anti-Marxist. What makes one a Marxist is not the conclusions that are accepted in the text of Marx, Engels, Lenin. What makes one a Marxist is their ideological alignment with the worldview of dialectical materialism. And this world tells us that what has primacy is material development. This world tells us that all things exist in a process of in a process of change, in a process of transformation, interconnected with everything else, embedded within complex, ever transforming totalities, and pregnant with contradictions. So when these people look at socialism in China and don't see the pure abstract ideal that they expect in their head, when they see contradictions, when they see interconnectedness with the capitalist global economy, when they try to fixate one moment and take it away from the fact that it's actually developing in this whole process, they're thinking in a fundamentally anti-Marxist manner, and the worldview that they're operating with is the purity fetish par excellence. And what I do in that book, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism, which is back there at my stand, I dedicate one whole chapter to the question of China. Because for two reasons, right? The main target of the US's new Cold War is very clearly China. It's the country that has been able to, that's the wrong book, Noah, but okay. It's the country that has,
oh wait, it's this.
it's the country, this, yeah. It's the country that has been able to embody.
I have it.
Good,
I
good.
have it.
It's the country that has been able to develop into the epicenter of the world economy, such that the capitalist classes in the West are themselves dependent on China. It's an incredible power that China has. That's why it's part of the main target of US imperialism. But the other reason why it's extremely foolish to have these fake leftists and fake Marxists talk about China in the ways that you have expressed, in the ways that we see here in the US and in other countries, it's because China is literally the proof of the success of Marxism. And this is said very clearly in Xi Jinping's speeches. He's like, what our success proves is not the success of us Chinese, or not the success of Confucius, or not the success of, just some arbitrary. No, it's the success of Marxism. China is proof of the fact that Marxism is correct. And when people who call themselves Marxists sit there and slander China on the basis of westernized purity fetish worldviews, they are functioning as anti-communists. I don't care how communist they call themselves. I don't care if they put the hammer and sickle in the bios of their social media. They're anti-communists if they slander the leading proletarian state that is the beacon of hope right now for all of humanity, not just for Chinese, not just for the global South, but for all of humanity. So I would say that if those are the people you're seeing when you go to the communist spaces, those are not the groups of people that you have to be around. I'm sure there's some of them in there that are going to be rational and that you can convince and provide these arguments for, and perhaps being in that space is a moment in a larger trajectory at the personal level. But institutionally, when these organizations come to adopt these positions, I have frankly never seen them change at the level of institutions. So I would say that, and I'll conclude with this, communism is a real movement of history. A lot of people have they have a long-term temporality understanding of communism, which I'm not going to say is not somewhere in Marx and Engels' text. Of course, yes, there is a society that we strive towards that eliminates some of the things that we recognize in class society, such as the mediation of social relations through money, such as classes that are necessarily in an antagonistic relationship to each other, such as the state as an institution of class oppression. Those are things that we want to eliminate eventually, hundreds of years down the line. But communism fundamentally in the here and now is the real movement of history, which abolishes the present state of things, not some abstract ideal we try to embody in the right here and now when there's no real potential for doing it. So look around Austria and see who are the people that are actually challenging the real state of affairs, that are actually challenging that social democratic, or you could even say, with alignment to the US, social fascist, which is what the Marxist-Leninists used to do, establishment. And those are the people where the spirit of communism is at. And one of the things that we have found in the US, and this is something that if people were actually dialectical thinkers, they would have understood this. All of these people that called themselves socialists and progressives and communists and whatnot in the US, but then turned around and supported the establishment, were they actually that force that was pushing history forward and revolutionizing the current state of affairs? No. But what was that force in the US that actually expressed a spontaneous consciousness of the fact that they needed to reject the existing state of affairs, that they were trying to fight, although embryonic though it was and outside of the lexicon of Marxism, trying to fight for the creation of something new, the rejection of all of the main the three-letter institutions and the banks and the politicians. And what was the group of people in the US that as an organized body still sustained that hatred of the establishment and desire to overcome it? It was the MAGA working class base. It wasn't the Rush Limbaugh kooks, and it was the MAGA working class base. So that's where we saw, okay, here's the potential, because here is where we can see in our conjuncture a consistent and organized force that stands for that real movement of history, trying to abolish the present state of things. And I'm rooted in the working class that was the proletariat of this country.
And I want to add that the leftists fighting against them are therefore fighting on behalf of the status quo against the real movement of history. And they do so while pretending to be communists, which grinds the hell out of my gears. And here's the thing. What they do is they reduce Marxism to utopianism because they can't understand that the proletariat, communism as the proletariat in motion, is the subject, right? In a subject-object relationship that becomes its own object, right? Their subject and object relationship meet in order to move things forward. They see only the subjective factor, as if we take an idea from our heads, or that Marx wrote 1,000 years ago, right? Or 200 years ago. And we pull that from our heads or Marx's book and we push it into reality. But instead, the process is we find this object, right? Reality around us. And our subjective will together as a class is able to change that object and create new conditions to create new types of people to change it again, and on and on and on and on and on, right? That's the Marxist perspective of the relationship between our conditions and how we interact with them. They create us, we change the conditions, those changed conditions create changed people. I hope that answers your question. I wish we had more time to stay on this because it's one of my favorite topics to talk about, but I know we still have a few more calls to get to, and we're getting late into the night. So thank you so much for your call, brother. Who do we have coming up next?
Thank you, Pavel.
I thank you,
Thank you.
and
Seriously, that was an awesome call.
have a good night. I maybe call in next Monday.
Please do. Please do.
Oh yeah, we look forward to it, brother.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being a consistent supporter.
For real. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Yeah, who do we have next, Daniel? And but before we get to that, dude, that was the fake left is possibly the thing that annoys me most in the world. Because when they do when they look at these things incorrectly and they put themselves on the side of the ruling class, they do so while pretending to be us. I wouldn't care if they didn't pretend to be us, if they didn't steal the icons and symbols of the proletariat, of communism. If they were just like, hey, we're liberals, we want to fight to, maintain wokeness, we'd be like, okay, cool, we can respect that. But that's not what they do. Sorry, go ahead, Daniel. What do we got?
Hey guys, we've got Graybush on the line. Graybush had a couple questions. I think one was about the election and one was about a Stalinist take on a particular issue. Take it away, Graybush.
Yeah, hi. How's it going?
We're good. How you doing tonight?
I'm all right. Hanging in there. So first question. I don't have a lot of time. I know you guys don't either, so I'll just be right to the point. Taking into consideration what Marx wrote about the importance of democracy in a socialist revolution, who would Marx vote for in this upcoming election?
Jackson Hinkle.
Excuse me?
Jackson Hinkle. No, I'm
Jackson
joking.
Hinkle.
I don't think he would vote. The Marxists wouldn't do much voting in the writings of Marx and Engels and Lenin. If there is something like an actual social democratic party that can advance somewhat the conditions of the class struggle and create more comfortable circumstances for communists to operate, Lenin says, okay, we critically support them electorally, but 99% of our work has to do with other things. We're not going to be hyper focused on sending cadre to get like Kamala Harris elected or some ridiculous thing like that. But that's not the conjuncture that we're faced with in the U.S. We're faced with two imperialist candidates that are in favor of continuing a genocide on the Palestinian people and carrying out a proxy war against Russia. One of them claims to be able to solve it in one day. We'll see about that. But it's very clearly that neither party has any semblance of representing the interests of the vast majority of the American people.
I want to maybe not go to Marx because I think Carlos covered that pretty well, but Lenin really sort of deepened this question because he was actually participating in something similar before the October Revolution, right? And the way Lenin describes it is that we do whatever is best for the class struggle at a given time. For example, at one point, he urges English communists to quote, support labor like a noose supports a hanged man, right? Because that was the weaker side of the institutions at the time, and would present them a weaker ruling class with which to fight that would be more divided. And it was a tactical decision. A lot of the times he would talk about voting for a candidate that can't even win just to be given a spot in the spotlight to reach people and propagandize and agitate and educate, that kind of stuff. So I think Lenin would be with us, and in saying that the best move for the working classes of the US, which we call the proletariat and the reproletariat, would be not just to not vote, but to campaign to boycott the election. In my opinion, the biggest dent we can put into the system right now would be for a record low turnout for this presidential election, as both candidates are saying they need to save the country from the other one, who is the most evil thing to ever be evil in the history of evil, right? Which is silly. But yeah, that's what I would say.
So just don't vote.
Mm-hmm. But not only don't vote, campaign against voting.
Campaign against voting. Okay, but I mean, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking, well, if you need, strong democratic institutions as a prerequisite to move forward to socialism, isn't this election important because one of the candidates is starkly anti-democratic and speaks of becoming a dictator? I mean, wouldn't it be easier to move to a new system of government if it was a democracy versus a dictatorship? Or am I just crazy to think that?
That's a good question, but Marxism views it differently. The way, and I'm going to go to Lenin again, who said that liberals can talk about democracy as such. A Marxist never forgets to ask for which class. So in our society right now, American society, there's democracy within the ruling class, on behalf of the ruling class, and for the ruling class. But when's the last time the people picked a candidate? Did you know you can predict elections over a 90, I think it was 95%, with over 95% accuracy? It might be 90, I forget which. Based solely, though, on how much money the candidate spent. The candidate who spends the most money is almost always the one who wins, right? And this includes, federal elections, big ones. This isn't democracy. What they have is the way they like their democracy to function for their class. They vote with their dollars, and they already pick which candidates to give us, right? Another thing that Lenin said is that every 4 years, the ruling class gives us two choices for who is going to exploit us or oversee our exploitation. So for us, there's already no democracy here. And what we seek to do is install a genuine democracy, which is fulfilling the promise of America that everybody already believes in here, which is government of, by, and for the people, as opposed to the elites. But what do you think about that, Carlos?
I think that more importantly, we have to also emphasize that the attack on the even formal institutions of bourgeois democracy is something that has been completely bipartisan. It has been under a Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration that people like the Uhuru Three have had their rights, free speech, completely stripped on a show trial of being Russian agents when nothing could be further from the truth. It has been under this administration that we've seen the crackdown of some of our comrades who have been fired from their university posts for daring to speak out against genocide and the usage of our tax dollar to fund genocides. Those are basic democratic liberties that are being stripped by the current fascist regime. It has been under this government that we have seen the crackdown of international travel on the part of peace and solidarity activists, such as Danny Shaw, that has been interrogated for hours on end at the airport, such as Christopher Halali, to whom it just recently happened, such as Dan Kovalik, and a million other people. It has been under this supposedly democratic administration that social media, such a public sphere of discourse, has been used and manipulated for the sake of controlling the opinions that are acceptable and those that aren't, and those that ask for peace, those that challenge the dominant imperialist narrative are censored. So I don't see how the image that you're painting for Trump isn't one that we already have right now with the Democratic Party establishment that has been completely eroding the basic formal liberties of bourgeois society. And it's not just the Democrats, it's a bipartisan thing. But if you really want to get down to the meat and potatoes of it, it does seem to be that the institutions that are foundational for the governance and trajectory of the country are far more comfortable with having something like a Kamala Harris presidency than having a Donald Trump presidency.
Mhm.
It's not because Trump is actually radical or anti-imperialist or a challenge to the establishment, but he's so incompetent and inconsistent in some areas that he'll go one day and kill Soleimani and the next become friends with Kim Jong-un and further peace in that arena. He'll go and say we need to invade Mexico, and then the next day say that he's going to solve, I think, one of the most, alongside Palestine, pivotal issues humanity faces right now, which is the potential for a third nuclearized world war, which means the end of humanity with this proxy war against Russia. Trump says he's going to stop it in day one. Now, it could all be bullshit, and 99%, if not more, of what politicians say, it's likely to be bullshit. But if we really want to have that sort of cost benefit, lesser of two evils analysis, objectively, unless you think something like trans rights is more important than 500,000 people dying in Ukraine, someone like Donald Trump is the lesser of two evils. But I don't have that sort of analysis. I recognize that both of them are furthering the development of fascism at home, are furthering the development of a very dangerous decay of imperialism abroad that is much more brazen than before in committing its crimes and just openly lying about it. So it's a situation where there's no candidate that working class people, peace loving people can support. I think that's evident.
But it sounds like you're a little more pro-Trump from what you just said.
I would say this: I'm not pro-Trump. I'm not pro-Trump. I'm saying that if one works with a lesser of two evils analysis, just on the basis of what politicians say, which again I reiterate, is not something you can trust. If Trump is saying we're going to stop the war, the proxy war against Russia on day one, and it's a war that more than 500,000 people have died. I mean, it's 500,000 people. More than 500,000 people have died.
And that's
There's
just
been
talking
areas
about
in
death,
Ukraine.
by the way. That's not including the immiseration.
Dismemberment and there's been areas like in Bakhmut, and Comrade Slava can attest to this, where people are being thrown into a meat grinder where they die within 4 hours. The average time of life for Ukrainian soldiers is 4 hours, and not all of them are Azov Nazi scum. A lot of them are people that just get conscripted by this fascistic government in Ukraine. So if there's a candidate saying we're going to stop that, and we're only measuring on the basis of what these liars say, okay? So I hope you follow the logic here. It's evident, I think, that taking that into account, Trump is the lesser of two evils. Now, we can't trust what these people say. Both of them are going to continue the genocide in Gaza, that's assured. And it's 99% likely that they'll continue the same policy with Russia and China and everyone else. So it's not worth, I think, voting. We have to boycott this complete degeneration of American society and basic formal bourgeois democratic institutions.
When I
It's
just
what
wanna
the people are already.
for you that
Just real quick, Noah, the people are already there. Like this, when Marxists say we should engage in this form of bourgeois electoralism, you are 2 steps behind of the American people, who more than 80% distrust the media And I saw a poll that said only 19% trust their representatives and are satisfied with the two-party system. So if 80% of regular American people who are not picking up Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin to read can agree that it's not really worth participating in this election, that it doesn't really matter, I don't see why people who claim themselves to be Marxists will fearmonger about one candidate while essentially having the one that they support be in substance very much the same as the one that they are fear-mongering about.
I just want to say that this sort of thing happens. What we see now happens, and what it symbolizes or signifies rather is that there is a breakdown of legitimacy and trust in the system. And when this happens, and it happens over and over again all over the world throughout history, it is always some new organization of people that come together and create new institutions that will do what we're told that these ones do, that they maybe used to and don't or never did, right? And that is a sort of revolutionary moment. The people, the working class, building new democratic institutions that actually work for us. What was your other question? Though it's something
Well,
about Stalin, right?
Yeah, but this question is kind of interesting.
Okay,
don't you
go
think?
ahead.
I mean,
Well, I'm just trying to move
if you
it
want,
along because we don't have a lot of time left.
okay. Just I guess, what's the Stalinist perspective on Jewish people, considering that he killed 2 million of them and engaged in a number of, I don't know if you call it operations, policies, which were described as and appeared to be anti-Semitic?
I would check your facts there.
Really?
Yeah, there. You know what's funny? Stalin said that a mound of garbage would pile on his grave after he died, but the winds of history would sweep it away. Speaking of the bourgeois propaganda about Stalin specifically, and it's interesting. There's this guy Domenico Lucerda, and he writes a book called Stalin: The History and Critique of a Black Legend, right? And in it, he traces how the propaganda about Stalin changed between World War II, when the US government was very pro-Stalin, calling him Uncle Joe and saying that, explaining red democracy in Time magazine, and changing into Red Scare mythology. And one of these weird sort of myths that got propagated was that Stalin was somehow anti-Semitic, which is crazy. If you actually read his writing, you can tell just organically that nothing could be further from the case. He writes one of his most famous pamphlets is called Marxism and the National Question. And the entire thing is a polemic against the Jewish section of the Russian SDLP, the Social Democratic Labor Party, that called itself the Boon, right? And he's not being anti-Jewish. He's just criticizing their policies and calling them reactionary for a very nationalist position that turned different ethnicities and sections of the working class against each other. He even describes that their policy, which was what he called reactionary federalism, had gotten so bad that there were, say, Ukrainian workers breaking the strikes of Polish workers, right? Because they had organized along these national lines, specifically within the organization. And what he says is the solution is the promotion of unity among all working class people of all ethnicities. And I mean, he writes a lot about the national question and the materiality of nations. Later on in his life, there's a collection, and I think it's the Collected Works 4 that has all these letters, but there's an entire collection of letters that he's answering on, things like language and the conditions of nation states after a communist revolution, because they'd had this, right? And so what he's saying is that what we're finding out, we had a very, or or they had had a very quick timeline originally. And they're saying now that we're finding out this actually is more fundamental, that nations and peoples stay nations and peoples in a socialist epoch, but there is, instead of an antagonism based in the competition between ruling classes when it's the bourgeoisie, there can now be a cooperative, comradely relationship between these peoples. Stalin even develops the Soviet of nations, right? Which is each nationality within the Soviet Union specifically representing that nationality within the government. And so Jewish was one of these. These are just a few examples. Do you have anything to add to that, Carlos?
No, I would just say that there's no evidence to what he's recording. That's not to say there weren't deaths under the Soviet Union. Yes, of course, in the 30s, there were trials of some of them were previous Bolsheviks, some of them were people that just hopped along at the end who were caught, and recent studies of the Russian archives has shown that there's proof that they were involved in conspiring to murder Stalin and overthrow the government of the Soviet Union at a time where the Hitlerite Nazi forces were around the corner on the doorstep to invade. And the actions that were taken by the Stalin government, which were democratic through and through, and the CIA admits this, were to enforce the death penalty on a lot of these people. Those are some deaths. Then there's what the Nazis call Holodomor, which was a genuine famine in an area that was famine prone for many, many years. And it was a famine that was made worse by the activities of the kulaks, the people who owned large plots of land, big farmers, basically, big landowners. And what's interesting is that after that process of collectivization, where agriculture was industrialized, in that very famine-prone area, there was never not one more famine. So those are the only two areas where I think people can point to deaths that occurred under the Soviet Union that were, in the Stalin period, besides the invasion by the Nazis and the Great Patriotic War. But I think that there's not one case of evidence that I've seen that says that there was any intentional targeting of any group. On the contrary, there's a whole lot of evidence towards the contrary, on the basis of that being a basic principle of Marxism-Leninism. You know who there is evidence for trying to target one specific group and do horrendous, dehumanizing things to them? After the war, Churchill and FDR, do you know what they wanted to do to the Germans? They wanted to castrate them. Not castrate. What's the word, Noah, that I'm looking for? Eliminate their ability to have babies.
Yeah, basically neuter.
Sounds like a castration to me.
Yeah. They weren't talking about like severing their parts, but they were talking
No.
a chemical process.
There's a specific term. Someone in the
Neuter.
chat threw it.
Maybe neuter.
Yeah. Well, the point is they're trying to prevent Germans from even sterilize. There we go.
Yeah.
They wanted to sterilize all Germans to prevent what they called the German race from reproducing. And Stalin was the guy that said, "This is fucking ridiculous. You can't blame the son for the crimes of the father." So all historical evidence shows that, on the contrary, Stalin was one of the leaders in the period that was at the forefront of not inflicting collective punishment on a people and defending people from the infliction of collective punishment. Let us not forget that it was Stalin who gloriously was able to fight back against the Hitlerite hordes that were murdering communists, socialists, social democrats, and Jewish people, Slavic people, and all sorts of people who didn't live up to their pure idea of an Aryan superior race. So
yeah,
all evidence points to the contrary of what you're assuming with this question.
I just want to say add one thing to that there was widespread anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe during this era. My grandparents are from the Soviet Union, right? And My grandmother, until she died, which was long after Stalin died, every night prayed for Stalin's soul because she loved Stalin that much. For her, he was not just the hero that saved them from the Nazis, but the man whose policies made anti-Semitism illegal. And I think that's also important to note. A lot of the stuff you're going to hear about the Soviet Union, you really, really got to check sources. And not even just the source to make sure it has a source, read what that source actually is saying, and then go to the next one. Somewhere along the line on almost everything, you're going to find something dishonest, something that just doesn't add up. And there's historiographers that specialize in the Stalin period of the Soviet Union. I'd recommend a guy named Grover Furr. We've interviewed him on this channel before. Although Carlos actually interviewed him, I unfortunately wasn't able to make it that day. But they were kind enough to do the joke I always put forward, which I'm going to tell you now, which is all of the propaganda makes it out that anyone who disagreed with Stalin, he would eat their baby. And then he would eat their babies' babies, right? Because it's just that cartoonish. Anything bad, they say Stalin did it. And a lot of this actually stems from his successor, Nikita Khrushchev, who comes to power and is standing in this giant shadow of that man my grandma loved, right? The hero that defeated Hitler. That is a title you cannot get out from under if you're the next guy, right? And so he begins by giving this thing called the secret report, where he blamed everything bad under the sun on Stalin. And it's just contradictory things that you couldn't even imagine. But I'm sorry, we've kind of been rambling on about this, and we do have more calls, and we're going to go over time. So I hope that answers your questions. Do you have any?
Not very well. Not very well, but it's an answer.
Oh, okay.
I don't think you honestly wanted your questions answered.
Sure, I
if
did.
you come, well, if we're pointing you to literature that can answer it, and we're asking you to point us to evidence, we're not dogmatists. If you can get us some evidence and literature that confirms your claims, we'll change our mind.
You mean like the list of you want the list of the historians who've written about Stalin's murdering of 2 million Jews? That's what you're asking for?
No,
I'm asking you to give me a list. I'm asking you, listen up here. Listen up here. I'm asking you, motherfucker, to give me a list that hasn't already been debunked by Grover Furr, Domenico Losurdo, and other great historians that actually give a shit about the fucking truth. And they don't just fucking reproduce the bullshit that comes from the anti-Soviet studies department in Harvard and in fucking Yale and all of these institutions.
Why are you so angry?
Because you are defending. You are defending. Shut the fuck up. Daniel, kick this fucking pussy out of here. Kick him the fuck out of here. I would not stand for this fucking bullshit. We talked to this motherfucker in good faith, and he's out here fucking talking shit. And if you're gonna come talking shit, stand on fucking business, bring us your fucking sources, and if we're giving you sources, shut the fuck up until you read the sources. Our people, our sources react to all the nonsense that he would have given us. What is he gonna say? The Black Book of Communism and a bunch of other bullshit produced by people like Timothy Snyder, who get millions of dollars in order to create false bullshit about Stalin and the Soviet Union, the literal people that beat the Nazis. You're going to tell me that the guy that defeated the slayer of Jewish people was killing Jews? Really? Fuck that.
It's always the Black Book of Communism or Robert Conquest or other nonsense. What really grinds my gears about these people, he acts after we give him detailed explanations, detailed examples, give him multiple pamphlets by Stalin himself, give him historiography. He's like, well, the answer wasn't good enough. Like, what answer were you looking for? Did you think we would just blindly believe the nonsense that you blindly believed without checking? The reason we don't believe it is because we did that work and actually checked, right? So like the whole thing is stupid. Who do we have next, Daniel? I hope a better caller than that.
Guys, I don't mean to get hot, and I don't like doing it, but we're treating someone's with a very good faith attitude. We have spent more time on this guy than anyone else. We just had a comrade named Pavel on. Pavel has been a consistent supporter, donator to the Institute. We have spent more time on this liberal, slave to only seeing the shadows on Plato's cave. And we have given him all this time. We have pointed him to literature that can debunk the nonsense and assumptions that he's operating with. Then he hits us with those snarky remarks. If anyone is listening to this, they realize that it was not a genuine question. It's not, hey, I've heard this, is there any truth to this? What can I look to? Okay, I'll go check that out. And then I'll come back after I check that out. If I have any other questions or if I see anything to the contrary, I'll bring it up and I'll show it to you. I mean, this show happens once a week. They can bring the sources and come with the sources and say, hey, Noah, this is the book I'm citing from. And then Noah can either respond or say, look, next week, after I look that up and see what's going on, I can give you a response, come back or something. But they don't do that. They just operate with their assumptions. You give them replies, you give them sources to back things up, and then they don't say anything. So, I mean, what are you going to do with these people?
What did I say in my opening rant? That liberals are not interested in listening or learning anything that can put a dent in one of their preconceptions. They operate on the basis that what they think they know is unquestionable and correct. And this is why we say they're tools of the ruling class, right?
And this guy's going to go vote for a candidate that's carrying forth a real genocide, a real fucking genocide. He's sitting here with the audacity of talking about some bullshit lies, myths about Stalin that even the most anti-communists don't ever fucking bring up. If the anti-communists bring something up, it's usually to the contrary, calling Stalin a Jew or something. They're JQers. Mm-hmm. He's going to sit here and lie about Stalin, the slayer of the genocidaire of Hitler, who was backed up by the imperialist West, while he's voting for a candidate that's supporting genocide right fucking now, that is supporting a war that has slain in vain more than 500,000 people. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here.
Oh, I want to get to a few things before we get to our last call. Long guy, $5. Thank you so much, brother. The democracy for Dems taking my tax money and committing genocide. We're giving Nazis money in Ukraine, kicking Greens off ballots, sham primary. That's what we were talking about. One of them being for democracy or something. We got more. ReZero Cult Leader, thank you so much for the $5, brother. ACP member, excited for the event. We are too. So excited. You have no idea. And Long Guy with a 2. Jew here, Stalin. I know Russian Jews who do too. There you go. Not hard. And last but not least, for now anyway, BLX. Thank you so much for the 5 memberships. Somebody snatch those up because they're going to go quick. All right. Let's try to put a happy ending on tonight's show. Who do we got next, Daniel?
Hey, guys, we've got friend of the show, Golden Parenti, with us today. They had some questions about how they raise concerns within their organization or a communist party. What's up, GP?
What's up, brother? How
what's
you
up,
doing tonight?
guys? Pretty good. Feeling pretty lucky, man. I got to hear Carlos rant live. Amazing. Amazing. Well,
I get to hear that every night. It's awesome every time, I promise.
I can't control it. I'm just Cuban. It just
That's
comes
that when I lived in LA, we would say that's that hot Latin blood, brother.
You're just lucky I'm not like cursing in Spanish or something. That's
the next step.
Oh man. Yeah, he's gonna feel that tomorrow. I actually I'm trying to ask this question, I guess, without putting anybody on the spot, because I genuinely have no idea how to tackle this. But I have some growing concerns about the possible direction my organization might be heading into. And I was wondering if you guys had any advice on how to bring this concern to them without I guess burning any bridges or
I'm-
scorching in the earth.
I'm going to have to tell you a very hard truth that it took me years to learn. That there's no way to do it. Not that I know of anyway. I mean, you know me, I'm a very nice guy. I try to approach everyone as kindly as I can. I give all the patience and benefit of the doubt to people I probably shouldn't. And I tried this and I failed miserably. There was no way to broach any sort of liberal dogma or motion against actual class struggle within the old party at all. And believe me, I wasn't the only one trying. Hundreds of people have tried this and failed. Because the institutions have been thoroughly sort of saturated with either actual anti-communist operatives or those who are manipulated by them, and think they're doing something that means well but aren't. Within some of the trot organizations, they almost all think they're doing the right thing, but they're not. And it's really hard to even get them to question, because anytime you step outside of that liberal dogma, you get a target on your back. They're paying attention to what you're doing from then on. I got blackballed in the old party the minute the Marxist position sort of butted heads with wokeism and doing silly things like progressive stacks and performative virtue signaling and things like that. And I was noticing at the same time that every idea I had to actually begin some sort of local motion in the class struggle would get shifted into something that wouldn't work. And so I came to the conclusion that either these are actual anti-communists or they're that far gone and the people in power above me are that far gone that they don't understand how detrimental what they're doing is for the class struggle. I'll give you one quick example, then I want to hear Carlos's opinion on this. I had this goal to have a free movie night, right, for the entire community. And we were going to show something class conscious, right? And it could be just a way for people in that community to get to know each other, to hang out in this sort of class conscious arena and watch this movie. And very cheap event, would only cost a few $100s to get a license to watch the movie publicly and show it publicly, right? Another like 100 to rent a screen, all that kind of stuff. Very cheap. It got changed into, we're not paying the bourgeoisie to, get this license just to show a movie. So we couldn't advertise it. Meaning, my plan for hundreds of people, which it was a new release movie, it easily would have drawn families, etc. This gets sort of slimmed down to just the club and another organization they asked to help with it, and like a couple friends, right? It was nothing. It did nothing, accomplished nothing. And it's always that sort of thing. It gets changed. And I wish I had an answer. But I mean, you see the answer that we've come up with. It was the reconstitution of the Communist Party along new lines. But what do you think, Carlos? Maybe you can give him something sunnier than me.
Yeah, I mean, what's sunny is that like it's not the fault of the individuals. Like it's really rooted in the institutions, and we came in into the scene of public activism to this extent because we were all working locally before that, but we come in like 5 years ago, and our goal is like, well, at the level of appearance, everyone seems to have a whole lot of agreement. Let's like bring people together. So we're like in close contact with people working in all of these different organizations. Our institute was like a hub for people from all these different organizations to participate in. We're interviewing scholars from all of the different organizations, and it was all fine and dandy. Um, but like pretty soon you realize that at the institutional level, not necessarily even the people, though people of course have to participate in it. At the institutional level, there's like a systematic unseriousness to it, where it's for a lot of these people either their way or the highway, and their way has been shown to be futile for decades. So what do? Well, you try to go through the democratic centralist processes to change things, because our experience primarily with the CPUSA, although we have experiences with the other organizations as well, but with the CPUSA, what I could say is that, look, a party can have a bad line. That's fine. It happens, and it will happen. But if it has democratic centralism, when forces that represent the correct line win, the majority, it can change. But when that party subverts the democratic component of democratic centralism in order to sustain a bad line, then you realize that it's so institutionally entrenched that there's really no hope unless you build your own institutions. So what I would say is that the positive, the golden kernel of it, right? Is that a lot of these people are young people that were mobilized by the necessity of their time, of our time. They don't see anything else but these organizations. A lot of them are in them. Uh, a good number of them are dissatisfied with some of the things they're seeing. Like you'd be surprised in our messages how many people we get messaging us about their organizations, and how they're thinking about, potentially leaving at some point. Um, at the level of individuals, we can't ever blame them, because they're going to the spaces that exist as like, oh, this, if you're a socialist, this is where you are. If you're a communist, this is where you are. But now there's a new space. Now there's a new space that is fundamentally rooted in all of those people that were in those spaces, that were actually serious, that saw the contradictions, that fought to change them. And that even after winning the majority, at least in the case of CPUSA, were prevented from democratically realizing the will of this new resurgent acceptance of communism, specifically by young people, but by other sectors of society as well. So now this new organization, ACP, is a kind of hub for all of the people that from other organizations were serious, were dissatisfied, but stayed because they saw there was no alternative. Now there's an alternative. And I think that with time, what you'll see is that the dissatisfactions that other people have, and the reasons for staying, which have mainly been there's nothing else, that reason is going to fall apart as soon as our party continues to do what we've been doing, which is actually serving our communities, developing more relations in the international front than any of the other parties already have.
Can I say one
And
thing
I
real
think
quick?
we'll show like that we're different in our actions, and I think we partially have been showing that as well. But go ahead, Noah.
I think you're absolutely right. We have been showing that, and the organizations that attack us, that slander us, that lie about us, are trying to copy us now. Why do you think that is? Because what we do works. And so, oh man, Andrew Ray with the 10, thank you so much. Said just got home, didn't get to call in. Lenin said we must participate in bourgeois elections. Left-wing communism, chapter 7. Could you please discuss? Yeah, we'll get that as soon as we're done with this call real quick. But we're already like 15 minutes over time. So, yeah, I just want to let you know, but we will get to that. So let's finish this up. I really wish I had a plan for you within that. But I think in this era, all of the people who are genuine are finding each other. And we're all going to be within the same thing soon. And that, I think, is the sort of bright note that I would end on. I hope that helps, brother.
Yeah, you guys have helped out a lot. Thanks.
My pleasure.
Thank you for sublating yellow parenti, by the way.
Oh, why does everybody keep saying that?
There was a guy who called himself Yellow Parenti. It was terrible. That, didn't actually follow Parenti. But you do, and we love you. And Thank you so much for your call tonight, brother. We appreciate,
appreciate
and
it.
we
Thanks,
appreciate the
guys.
support. All right.
All right. Thanks.
Let's get to this.
What up? We got poppers. We have
Oh,
poppers here.
Poppers.
Thank you so much, poppers. $5. I'm looking forward to meeting you at the event next month. Yes, we are as well. Last in-person event was amazing. It's always so fun meeting all of you, getting to talk to you all, and seeing the drive that everyone has in their eyes. That's something that I've noticed is kind of different to some other organizations that I've been a part of in the left. You look at people and it kind of just feels like it's a social club. They're comfortable with where they're at. They just want to hang out on weekends with their homies. And it's not to say that you can't have fun hanging out with your comrades on the weekend, but when we had the IFA event and other events, what I saw in most of our cadres' eyes was a determination to actually, fight and commit themselves to this project. And it's only on the basis of that level of faith and determination that we'll be able to do something. So I very much look forward to seeing all of you in person once again.
Absolutely. I everything Carlos said, double for me. All right, let's get to Andrew Ray's question. Yeah, Lenin does say that we should at times participate in bourgeois elections. He even quotes Engels on it, right? Saying that it can be a gauge on our strength and our sway with the working class. He also says that just because we know that bourgeois elections are for the bourgeoisie doesn't mean that everyone is there. That people have to learn that these bourgeois elections aren't for them on their own, right? As a political sort of action collectively. So, what is going on here? Oh, okay, I see what you did. My bad. Sorry, brother. So yeah, I think that there are all sorts of ways to participate in a bourgeois election, and the way we go about it has to be based on a sober material analysis of the conditions on the ground right now and how we think it can affect the class struggle. We do A if it drives the class struggle forward, but if it doesn't, we do B, right? That kind of thing. What do you think, Carlos?
Yeah, and part of what Lenin is reacting in that very important text, I think it's one of the most important texts from Lenin that we could read, is the fact that at a time when you actually had one of those opportunities to participate in bourgeois elections and have it be fruitful for the class struggle, there was people going back to a tactic that the Bolsheviks had previously used, which is boycotting the election. So what does that tell you? That principle, or that those statements that he makes about participating in the election, those are not like to be raised to the level of abstract principles, because precisely what he's reacting to is people saying, "Hey, Lenin, some years ago you said we should boycott. Why should we vote now?" So it's all about context, right? Lenin is not giving us a sort of formula to bake to use Noah's phrases, to bake a pie for how socialists should conduct themselves every election. That'll be thinking way too abstractly. In his context, his point is, in this context, it could be fruitful for the advancement of this class struggle to participate in it, therefore we should. In other contexts, when it wasn't, he didn't. He called systematically as a party for a boycott. Our assessment is that because of the conditions of our decaying capitalist imperialist order, because of the fact that both parties are supporting genocide and have nothing to do with the sort of parties that Lenin himself asked are okay at some moments to support. When he says the Labor Party, he's not talking about the Labor Party of today. He's talking about a Labor Party that the vast majority of people in it were calling themselves Marxists and understood themselves to be socialists. It was understood as a socialist party. He was talking about voting for social democratic parties, for parties of people that called themselves socialists, a lot of them that were a part of the Second International. So it's a big, big difference to go from that, hey, in some contexts, we got to vote for the Social Democrats, to going from, hey, we have to absolutely vote for the imperialist, fascistic Democratic Party. And I think that what people do is that they take positions that are rooted in certain contexts and they elevate it to the level of an abstract generality and say, as Leninists, we always have to participate in elections and figure out how to foist onto the world some advantage that can come about to the class struggle from these elections, even if in the real world no advantage actually exists. So we have to reject that sort of tendency. And when you see people putting up decontextualized quotes, you have to understand that they're not thinking like Marxists. If they were thinking like actual Marxist-Leninists, they would realize that context is everything. And that in the same sections that they're citing, what is implicit is an understanding that, yes, there's other times where you don't have to vote, where on the contrary, you have to do what Noah suggested, which is boycott this whole thing and make that sort of political statement. And if the American people are basically almost there, I don't see the need for Marxists to, on a basis of an abstract understanding of Lenin, engage in a politics that in terms of revolutionary political class consciousness is 2 steps behind where most of the American people are at.
It's a reactionary position, right? I'm going to leave you guys with my favorite quote from my favorite Marxist thinker, J.B. Stalin, who said that everything depends on the conditions, time, and place. Carlos, thank you so much for joining me today, brother. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Everybody else, super secret stream right after this. We're going to talk about the CNN hit piece. Stay tuned for that. We'll see you all next time.
Hi, Sheriff.
Actually, I'm going to play the right video.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no right. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In a world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken, now they must give. And end the vanity of nations, we've but one earth on which to live. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. And so begins the final drama, in the streets and in the fields. We stand unbowed before their armor, we defy their guns and shields. When we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. So come, brothers